Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and today is Discord Tuesday, where in some ways we talk, it's a catch-all. We talk about mechanics, talk about other things relating to our tabletop role-playing game experience, and this week, the entire week, we'll be talking about one of maybe a top five. It might be in your top 10 most hated aspects of role playing games based on the setting and the game system that you play in, and that is flight. And yesterday, Monster Monday, it devolved in kind of a catch-all as well, but it doesn't matter. We talked about some of the many of the pitfalls and some of the ways to solve some of the pitfalls of flight in a tabletop RPG setting, and even including measuring heights when you're using minis, and creatures and adversaries, and some game settings that maybe we are more likely to accept the ability to fly in the setting than others, like science fiction, heck, even modern, with helicopters and airplanes and parachutes and things of that nature, and more sci-fi with everything from vertical takeoff and landing vehicles to starships and zero gravity to even hovercraft and jetpacks and glider wings and things of that nature. But and of course, any kind of mechanized combat game has at a minimum, say, jump jets all the way to flight itself. But even with those elements being in those games, there is a matter of having, like, flight just lets you avoid so many things that we, as many of us as game masters and designing our games and coming up with adventures, have problems, because the flight itself allows you to avoid those elements. Now, one way, and can be a bit difficult, but one way to solve that, of course, is to make flyover country far more interesting than flying past it. And that can be quite difficult, especially, the running joke for the Lord of the Rings movies is, like, why didn't Gandalf just call the eagles and fly the ring to the mountain? It would have been done in 5 minutes. Hell, you wouldn't even have to land, right? Could have stopped for snacks or something maybe along the way and kept on going. But it didn't happen because the land travel was far more interesting. Now, of course, that's written by an author. You can't control what your what your players will do with their characters. Oh yeah, that man puts into the Discord, like, land, air, mech, or lambs, transforming mech that goes from walker to air. Tesla's like, cause Sauron has a American air. Well, yeah. Yeah. It's kind of yeah. I think that was, heck, I blame the elves on that part. It was like, oh, so just because you decided not to push somebody into the mountain. Oh, anti-aircraft. Oh, yeah. Which of course, in a modern setting out the far future, there are anti-aircraft mechanisms, and especially if they're used to having something like that. The one PC that's like, I've got flight, yay, I can dominate everything, might be like the most targetable being in the region or whatnot. Also, one way of equalizing flight is, well, if you have a setting where flight is the norm, if everyone can fly, it kind of means that no one can. Or, in other words, it's less special or less game breaky if flight is available, rather than available to the masses, rather than, say, only available to one PC. We did talk about the fact that a lot of player characters feel like, well, once I get flight, then I'm the only one that can fly in this world, and that may not be the case. So when involving flight in the tabletop game, either introducing it or having an element in your world, of course, we have to talk about session zero. For example, if you are playing in the Eberron city of Sharn, and the city of towers, I believe it's called, or something. Anyway, it's a big giant vertical city, and it's like a medieval version of Coruscant. Well, I don't know. Ravnica, I guess, is the same thing. But anyway, big giant city, and it goes up for miles, and you can have various adventures in it. And of course, they have magic and flying creatures and flying apparatusi, all around, because it is a vertical city, and in order to get from one place to another, they have mail delivery services, I believe, by gargoyles. One of the old books, they had gnolls flying on magic carpets and what looked like portable, like tensors floating discs with an airship or air skiff or something, and a flying warforged or whatnot. So anyway, the point of all that is that there may be multiple methods to give people the ability to resist gravity in your setting, be it through telekinetic ability, psionics, magic, some kind of energy signature. Which is one of the things I wanted to bring up are, when someone flies, maybe there's some kind of residue or signature, or something is given away that allows the PC to fly. For example, if you have jetpacks or feathered wing cloaks, or the proverbial flying carpet, if someone's walking around with those items, maybe those items might go missing. They are easily identifiable once someone is in them. Maybe there are others who, they may not know you, but they may know the manufacturer or the creator, or even the weaknesses of said flying ability. Much like we talked about yesterday about wings, if you want to include some form of mechanical aspect to wings, giving them, in Dungeons and Dragons, giving them a hit location, or some form of divided hit points, or usability or repair for, say, mechanical or constructed glider wings or something. And of course, not everything has to fly like a plane. It could be ornithopters and bicycling, pedal power. It could be through some kind of mineral or material that is gathered in the world that allows something to resist gravity, but then you need something else for propulsion. It could be through the summoning of elemental magics like fire to make that balloon fill with hot air, or air to fill in a bladder and have it lift in the air, or it could be airships powered by air elementals to lift them up, or a mineral, some kind of sized discovered mineral that is hacked away from the floating islands in your world and placed inside of these ships, and allows them to resist gravity. So at least there is a consistency and a pseudo-scientific method for how it is people are able to fly, including the fact that if a wizard or some kind of wizard-like being in your world, wizard-like beings, multiple, in your world have the ability to fly, that they must either go to a specific school to learn it, or yeah, or even, let's say, different particular schools of magic or psionics or something like that, have their own signatures that others can follow. Pelora says, just thinking about Keith David delivering mail now, I'd move for that. Which Keith David did the voice of Goliath in the Gargoyles show? I believe that was the character's name. Oh, it's been a while, but a great show. And yes, those gargoyles perched on the on the edge of buildings before, so that the sunlight would hit them and they would be able to move, which in your setting may be a thing, right? Using and even if humanity can't fly, they may still use flying animals or some other method to fly. Today we use drones, and you can buy them over the counter. And yeah, Goliath, yeah, and what a great show, and also a retirement home for voiceover work for much of the next generation cast from Star Trek too. A lot of them did voiceover work for that show. There's also in the past they had trained falconeers, and hell, there's still people that train pigeons and things of that nature. So there are flying things, and then of course let's not forget about the very small flying beasties, such as like mosquitoes and flies and locusts and things of that nature. What was brought up yesterday was Scott Poe talking about his 6-inch fey creature with wings flying around, and yeah, anything from blankets to cages to nets would affect them, and we talked about exhaustion. But okay, mechanically speaking, and we could talk about dice and the problems that you may have, is that flight very much is a force multiplier, right? You have range, you have distance, you have the ability to avoid hazards, although the list of hazards is far larger than one would think. But making the land itself far more interesting brings to light the idea that you want to make an excuse to interact with, say, the ground. That is, of course, unless your ground is in an aerial format, right? So, for example, it would be very easy for the flying PC to go, hey, well, I'm just going to fly over you guys' heads and go straight to the lich that's in the dark castle. You know, yeah, I know I'm first level, but whatever. The lich 20th level, big deal. It makes sense for my character to fly over there. Let's go. Now, if the PC if there's a single PC that's got flight and the rest of the PCs can't catch up, well, I mean, it's a death sentence. If it's already been explained, let the death sentence happen. I mean, what's the big deal, right? Now, the other method would be the other method for that would be that along the way, crypts, villages, a map that leads to a specified area, those kind of things make the travel and the journey and the locations the PCs have to investigate far more interesting. An abandoned tower, sure, the PC can fly up to the top, but if the interesting part is in the basement, what's it matter? Sure, the PC could, the regular characters are in the bottom levels of the tower, the flying character can enter through the top, but if the center of the tower without the windows and such are there, sure. Now, does this mean that as a game master or dungeon master, it requires you to think about these things previously? Yes. Not that you can predict what your player characters do. Instead, create the problems and then allow them to solve those situations. And if flight is in your world, just think of flight being a problem. Don't worry about what the specific PC will do. Just understand, let's see, in our world, we have, giant eagles and flying eyeballs and people on floating skiffs. So why would a big giant tower have an open window you could fly in? Well, maybe there's a landing pad. Okay, so maybe there's a landing pad, but, the throne room wouldn't be at the top floor. Maybe it's hidden in the middle or locked away or something, and just start to think about it like that. Much like you guys are mentioning in the Discord, and as you guys can see below, that this show is simulcast on through Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College. You can pop down into the boiler room if you want to hear the audio. Twitch and YouTube. And you can, of course, join the chat in all of those. Yeah, Dead Man brings up and Vargoyles. You know what? An underutilized undead creature. It's the I don't know. I always picture the Vargoyle as like having a head that rips out of a dead body with a gristle hanging off of the spinal cord with wings on the back of its head or something. Yeah, it's that's pretty nasty undead creature. What's another one? Will-o-wisps are are a pretty nasty creature as well. Most outer plane creatures have flight of some sort, flight and or teleportation, as well as the ability to shift. Oh, it's wings for ears. That's it. That's it. Little bat wings for ears. I don't. It doesn't really need those. I think it's far more hideous for the spinal cord to jump out. Scott Poe, hey, talked you up. What's going on there, man? So all of these things put together can make something pretty dangerous, and it could make something far more interesting. Again, forcing either the flying PC to go into smaller, narrow chambers, but without punishing the PC, a location like we talked about, a stadium or a domed city or something where there is space to fly, but you are still bounded by the structure that you are inside of or around, and also maybe making things interesting for the people who are flying in the first place. Okay, it could be maybe part of the PC's group is to fend off invaders or something, but there's also a flying skiff, and you literally put in extra flying things so that the flying player character has something to encounter and deal with, and on their own they can't, but with the help of the other player characters, it's possible. Now, mechanically speaking, here's another thing that we tend not to think about, but is a real obstacle in a lot of role-playing games, but we tend to ignore it, and that's range. Now, again, flight is a mechanical force multiplier, right? Hey, I have the ability to launch attacks from a distance, and I could even drop things on people or swoop down and pick people up or shoot things at range, and then others cannot hit me if I am flying. But we often tend to ignore the fact that 99% of most role playing games, be it Dungeons and Dragons and all the other iterations of other types of games, that those special abilities that the PCs have that are not flight have a range to them. And you must be able to see your allies and or enemies to use some of these abilities as well. So, for example, a player character that is 120 feet in the air staying out of the range of, say, catapults may not be at range for that bless spell that the cleric loves to use each and every time, or that guidance spell or resistance spell, or that word of healing. They may not be able to hear the words of healing if they are too far away, right? They have to be in range near the paladin whose aura of purity is protecting the PCs. If the player character is too far away, maybe they can't come into the Leoman's tiny hut that is placed in the blizzard, the northern blizzard world, and blizzard lands or something, and take sustenance or whatever. I mean, there will be moments where the PC really must eat with the rest of the group, or even hear plans if they're unable to communicate with each other. And Caius, we brought up yesterday, but Caius of Glantry says, updrafts, air currents, turbulence, planes today hit turbulence all the time, pockets of air, storms, winds, heck, even, I suppose you could even throw in vacuum, hurricanes, tornadoes into the mix as well. Gravity manipulation, whether it is through magic or otherworldly incidences, or even used as defensive measures against around cities to prevent those nasty flying things that happen to be around. Guys, this is a layer of cloud. Yeah, Well, not well. First of all, a layer of cloud itself, or fog, because fog is technically a cloud on the ground, right? Hell, I'll add into that fog, steam, mist, smoke. Is included in there when they're flying around mountainous regions or geysers or hell, here even in the states, there's the Smoky Mountains. Every morning, there's a heavy fog and mist of dew that clings to all of the plant life and such. And if you're flying in those valleys, yeah, sturges, yeah, clouds of sturges, bats, other giant flying things that may cling to a person, as well as the fact that you get that smoke, mist, steam, fog somewhere. Having a solid, a big, wide, heavy, solid object like, oh, I don't know, a castle, a mountain, a cliff face in there is a bit of a problem. So Scott Post says, got to be a lot of weathermancers in a flight themed city. Yeah, tomorrow is World Building Wednesday. We're going to get together and design a setting that is in the air and come up with like all of like the really cool permutations on that, like weathermancers and that kind of thing. There might even be specialists. So there are like, yep, and Deadman says Spelljammer had several creatures that would work for that. Oh hell yeah. And let's not limit ourselves. We as creators can give flight to anything in our world. What is that? A boule? Yeah, it can fly now. It's got wings. What is that? What are those, orcs? Yeah, or winged monkeys. Never heard of winged monkeys before. Oh wait, they're in the Oz setting. That's right. But but again, oh man, yeah. Oh yeah. Rickard says should be mentioned that turbulence isn't as big a thing unless you're going fast. Are you kidding me, dude? PCs are always going fast. That's the coolest part of it, right? Is the dive bombing and the dodging and all that kind of business. Now we did come up with the mechanical idea that you could come up with a numerical value for both speed and or maneuverability, so that all, like for example, you could just default to the dexterity or agility or reflexes of. Oh, that's true. Rickard says not airplane fast though. Although, who's to say just turbulence isn't a thing in your world that affects everything from hot air balloons to flying castles. In your setting, that may be a thing. Updrafts and all that kind of thing. Updrafts and air currents and turbulence and all that kind of business. Yep. I mean, who's to say that those things aren't in the world? For example, there may be you could create air currents as predictable hazards, so that PCs must be able to navigate around them. So, for example, a castle may be built specifically on the edge of a cliff face because of the updrafts, and as flying creatures, everything from birds and other predatory creatures to nuisance pigeons and that kind of thing, could be affected by the updrafts, staying away from the very rich nobles that live in the castle, right? And then when the PC flies near this building, they have a difficulty, they have to make maneuver checks or whatever, or they're blasted upwards, and then their winged experience is abilities taken away from them temporarily while they are discombobulated. Yeah, Rickard says effects sure, but the bumpiness is more a factor of going in and out of updrafts. Okay. I yeah. Hey, by the way, if you go near this area, you're gonna have to you got to worry about dropping something out of your backpack and knowing that you can't fly with with full plate mail or something, right? That's a real thing. Scott Post says while I agree with the real physics, in a game setting, we can turn the volume up on those things, right? Kind of silly of us to default to real physics when there are things that are happening in worlds that aren't real. So being able to manipulate those real physics into the world, as long as it's consistent, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Scott Post says the forecast calls for your doom, followed by by fair skies and light clouds. Uh, there's meteorological mancers who are pointing at green screens to let people know about the upcoming storms and stuff. That'd be a cool way to retire a character. Like, I got the 20th level. I get to now be a weather forecaster. My name's going to be Stormy Weathers. Caius Caius Glenn. She says solid air, steam, and smoke methods. Hell yeah, hell yeah. And listen, there are lots of flying creatures. We just tend to place them in grounded locations. So, but there's a lot of them. I mean, I brought up some of the classic medium level ones: manticores, pegasi, sphinxes, harpies. Brought up sturges, gargoyles. I love medium level enemies anyway. But shape anything that shape changes. Who's to say that there aren't flying, that the age of flight in your world may bring upon it a new set of enemies? Like there could be a flying ooze of sorts that is very much like a steam or a smoke method or something like that. Um, Joe Keenan says buildings make their own currents. Manhattan, Chicago, etc. Joe's like, wasn't Stormy Weathers a porn star? As a matter of fact, yes, and I believe visited Central Ohio and got in some legal trouble, and I think got paid, if I'm not mistaken. Rickard says might not affect large floating islands, as they can ride on all of them, like how you can lay down on a spiked mat. Yep. But smaller flying creatures will have their flying messed up. I agree with that. I very much agree with that. Bringing up the idea that you can lay on a bed of spikes because you're spreading out your weight. So in this turbulent world, we're getting into World Building Wednesday, but whatever. In this turbulent world, the larger the island, the less dynamic the air currents might be, because they might be sitting on top of the dangerous air currents, which make is a good excuse for why falling off of, say, a floating island isn't a good thing, because you might get snatched away by the roiling clouds and such. And of course, flying through a storm cloud might not be an intelligent thing to do when a storm comes by, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm flying through it, and you're like, okay, you mean that big solid metal spear and those metal items you have on you? And like, is that going to draw lightning to me? Well, and then you're like, well, technically you might have to be grounded, but Joe puts in the Stormy Weather 1943 film. Well, let's be honest. Stormy Weather is as a name or a title or something like that isn't that original. That's why the hell I came up with it. Although maybe I was thinking of the porn star. Wow. Dead Man says, quote, until you've seen a king's head tear off his shoulders and flap aloft and fountaining blood, only to turn up and lap up its own dying gore as its body totters and falls, you haven't lived yet. Oh shit, it moved. And if you want to go on living, you might want to stop watching in favor of fleeing. A direct quote from Elminster talking about Vargoyles. I love a Vargoyle. I just think they're underutilized, because you could have a Vargoyle rip out of its own body and then use the rest of the body to fill it with some other things in there, like, I don't know, a skeleton. Maybe the muscle structure is like a choker. The skin could be reskinned as a cloaker or something like that. Maybe the internal organs could be reskinned from a giant snake or something. Omen, omen, omen. Dirty, dirty omen. Bad. Stormy Weathers is a 1943 American musical film produced and released by 20th Century Fox. Cab Calloway. Oh, cool. It isn't dirty. The film is considered one of the best Hollywood musicals with an African American cast, the other being MGM's Cabin in the Sky. The film was considered a primary showcase of some top African American performers of the time, during an era when African American actors and singers rarely appeared in lead roles in mainstream Hollywood productions, especially those of the musical genre. Yeah. It has the best dance number. Is that where that dance number comes from? I know I've seen that dance number plenty of times as a clip, but I never knew where it came from. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. Guess what? Sometimes I gotta be learned. So hell yeah, you guys make make this channel look good. Uh, Thank you, Rickard. Yeah, the Nicholas brothers tap dance. Yep. Oh man. Yeah. The Nicholas brothers. Jesus. Yeah, I don't know how you can do that many splits over and over again. Anyway, Rickard goes on to say micro updrafts also solves the problem with physics, as in the general gist of it works, even if the environment creates something unique that you can't solve the problem the same way. Yeah, in other words, we can take real world physics and then apply a mechanic to it in the game. And sure, are people generally hit by lightning bolts in reality? No. I mean, could you establish a 5% chance of being hit by lightning? Sure. Is that far greater than the norm? Yes. But fantastical worlds, fantastical things happen, and then we can take those. It's easy to relate these fantastical things by applying a real world not physics. Yeah, a real world physics to it, so that the player characters go, oh, updrafts, floating islands. I get it. Okay, what do I need to roll? Well, you have a 10% disadvantage on that or something like that. And you're like, oh, okay. Kaya says, does a gate have to be on solid ground? On both sides? Could you have a building entrance to another plane in the 12,000 feet above the Earth? Yeah, yeah. No one says that. Like, okay, what if portals to other realms were created, and then the locations that those portals were created in crumbled away for some reason, forcing people to have to fly to get to them? So a giant tower could have a portal to the plane of air, because we're talking about flying, and then that tower over time has crumbled or fallen, or there were earthquakes or some other mechanism, but the portal could still be way up in the air, kind of like a Pandora gate or a Stargate sitting up in the sky, and everyone's looking up at it like, we could escape our mediocre lives if we could just get the hell up there. And then it's possible that the tower itself was buffeted by winds we couldn't see, from the ground, or couldn't feel or experience from the ground. And maybe your world, or maybe this region of the world, is buffeted by major storms, or what are much like Joe talking about large cities having large buildings, and those buildings, even today, large buildings have different weather systems the higher you go up. Buildings sway due to its mass and wind and things of that nature. Who's to say that towers, those massive sky-reaching towers and monoliths we love to put into our games, a city like Coruscant would have hugely affected weather systems just based on the mass of and the height of the buildings, and creating wind tunnels and passages and things like that. The same could be said for like the Underdark. There could be literal wind tunnels, and those wind tunnels may flow in one specific direction, i.e. in the direction you want to go, which might be used for travel in the Underdark very quickly instead of tunneling. But if the PCs want to go against those wind tunnels, that's a thing. Rickard says, I think the Nicholas Brothers scene and the Whitney's Lindy Hopper scene in Hell's a Poppin' might be the two dance scenes I have seen more than any other scene combined. Really? somebody throwing a link to that in the Discord, or hell, Tesla and Deadman. Let's see which one of you can pop it into a link somewhere, since you guys have the ability to do that. Tesla brings up Stargate Atlantis. Some of the gates are in space, so they have a reason to use the puddle jumper. Yeah, exactly. And again, if a single PC has flight, and if you're not adding any tension or timer modifier, like a tension generator, sure, the PC can just go, oh, I'm going to fly over each of my allies one at a time. But if there is a time limit for like a gate closing, or a rope bridge about to snap, or a narrow passage, a narrow shaft that's deep into the ground about to close up, or collapsing rock into it or something. Thank you, Dead Man. Yeah. Um, Talking about the Hell's a Poppin' film. Now, oh, and Rickard threw in a YouTube link to it. Go ahead and watch that video. Thank you very much. Thank you. The and hell, in celebration, it's Black History Month here in the States. A little adds a little bit to that. But yeah, that could be a thing. And as a matter of fact, in your world, maybe all of these aerial phenomena, right? So a side effect of flight being an acquired ability in the world might be due to one or more open pathways to the plane of air. And sure, as a side effect, we can fly around, but maybe, just maybe, there are other things. Now, when it comes to science fiction and flying, we have lots of planets and scientific things we can pull from. Light gravity is one of them, air currents, aerostated habitats that can float, or at least we think through physics can float in the upper atmosphere of Venus. Domed cities on light gravity worlds, once those domes are filled with air, like Mars, the moon, many asteroids and such that aren't spun for gravity, will allow lots of people to, as long as there's a modicum of gravity or spun for light gravity or something. I could imagine using wingsuits or glider wings, or maybe even something as simple as specially designed cloaks or clothing that can catch air currents, especially if. Thank you very much for the Nicholas Brothers link as well, there, Rickard. Yeah, there is a possibility that you can have, especially young people, parkour free runners or something, jumping, dozens to hundreds of meters through the air in the open open air malls or something in a city, while all the parents are looking up at the sky at the kids doing it, and they're like, oh, damn kids. But of course the PCs have to get involved in that too. And so yeah, why not? And as a matter of fact, you may even have space habitats that are connected in as a geodesic. So the spurs, you guys have seen the space stations that are spun for gravity, and they look like an inner tube connected to a central pipe, and usually the connecting spurs or struts are actually could be very large, and you can float through them. So if you're in the outer ring, you feel the spin gravity, but as you get closer to the central tube, gravity starts to reduce, and that may be a way for PCs and NPCs to float around and use updrafts. And maybe there's a natural air current in a space station that blows things in a particular direction. Are they called Tauruses? I was about to call them Taurids, but they're Hey Harry, hey, listen. Calling me a youngster. Listen, I'm an old grognardian like yourself there, sir. Thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you very much for supporting. I can feel the thumb from here as well. So, but yeah, guys, if you want to really support the channel, and I thank you for the cup of coffee. If you really want to support the channel, sorry, I'm reading a comment. You can like, share, subscribe. Hell, go over to Twitch and if you are a Twitch affiliate, and go over to Twitch, find the RPG with DBJ channel, and you help me become an affiliate. If I have 50 followers or more, I get to move on up, and they may gift me with even greater access. So that would be sweet. Yeah. Yeah, O'Neill cylinders. Yep. Um, yeah. Joe says depends on the designs on the station. O'Neill cylinders has the same thing even with being hollow in the center. That is correct. When you have spin gravity in science fiction, and to create spin gravity, the closer you get to the center of the spin, the less gravity until there is no gravity, which is the whole point of having spin gravity. And as a matter of fact, Isaac Arthur, who has a great YouTube channel, please go over to Isaac Arthur. He doesn't need my help, but whatever. Even talks about spin cities, that you can have a spin city on the ground, say like on the surface of Mars, and the spin of the city might be at an angle to establish some form of gravity or artificial gravity on a light gravity or zero gravity, say, asteroid or something like that. Thank you, Christy. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Been away a while. I am impressed that you even remember the rest of us, even though it's been a while. Joe says it's fun for. Did you have to add the word grenades in there? It's fun for tossing grenades. Coriolis effect. Yeah, there is a. The idea is that there's no such thing as zero gravity. There's always something pulling on something, and if you were to drop an item like a grenade down a zero gravity shaft, that it would start to spin and be attracted in one shape or form to eventually start to get into a larger and larger spin. How much, I don't know. Shit, I'm sure there's a mathematical way of measuring the mass and the distance and all that kind of business. But yeah, Rickard says, let's not forget jet streams. You might have to have so forceful jet streams that you can only safely navigate in very specific regions. And I could imagine jet streams. Actually, I actually put it in one of the aerial reaches book that I did for the cinematic environments. But anyway, jet streams could be used to achieve airplane and propeller and jet-like speeds for things that can't go those speeds, by going to a specific aerial layer and then finding a jet stream and then getting carried along that jet stream to get from one place to another very quickly, or relatively quickly, based on a, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons 60-foot move, right? Like dragons that not only have a very high movement rate could find a jet stream to travel 200, 300 miles with using very little wind power. And of course, birds are a very good example of using manipulating air currents, which is why they fly in that V shape, right? Because the air currents trailing off of the wings of the head bird make it easier for the other birds to fly. This was proven on MythBusters with airplanes, if you don't know that. Oh, I it's like YouTube says Isaac Arthur, 462,000 subscribers. RPG with DBJ, 1,720x 20 something subscribers. Yeah, nah, I don't believe he needs my help. But what the hell? If it's quality, why not? Thank you, Christy, over there on Twitch. Thank you very much for that. I can understand that, although I am simulcasting on 3 platforms, that it might confuse you a little hearing the audio and the visual not being a match. But Ricker says you might even have it so that you can't travel by air between to continents, as the streams will rip anything apart. But once a week, you get an hour of opening to go through. I like that a lot. As a matter of fact, the same, you could pull things from maritime sailing conflicts, right? There are locations, for example, if you travel down into the Caribbean, there are locations where different southern currents meet with northern currents, and it has some kind of a effect. And if you have a floating island world, it might be extremely dangerous to navigate through what would essentially be oxygen filled an oxygen filled asteroid field. So you could have something like that. You could even have floating rocks that act as like meteorites in your world, needing to dodge those kind of things, and giving flight to things that normally are aquatically natured. So giant squid that are able to expel inky clouds of darkness as they they slither through the air or something. Maybe you in your world you have floating jellyfish and they float through the air, or the elemental worlds have mixed and shifted so much that your world now is aerial, but the aquatic creatures or those aquatic styled creatures may exist in your realm of air, and they exist in the upper reaches of your world. Much like the, you know, the books written by the people who were in the age of exploration and didn't know what was on Mars and just assumed, oh, there are canals on Mars. That means there was life on Mars. Maybe in your setting, going to the sky, going to the clouds is a dream of so many people. But once they got there, they discovered something that doesn't correspond to our real world physics, but does exist in that world. That there's a whole world above the clouds. Harry, hey! Thank you very much, Harry. Go, you guys, pop it over to Twitch. Thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it, even if whatever. I appreciate it. I'm not gonna add an asterisk to it. I don't take complimentary things very well, and I guess I should start to do that. Oh man, Rickard says, like the space debris storm in the movie Gravity. Yes, absolutely. Like this. Well, you didn't put a question mark in there. I put the question mark. But yes, the space debris storm in the movie Gravity could be a thing. Could be a thing in the aerial world. Hell yeah. Why? That Spelljammer airship that got destroyed, that material might still be floating around your fantasy world, or hell, in the show The Expanse, a starship was destroyed, and the escaping aircraft, I believe it was the third season, but anyway, the escaping aircraft was like, we're not out of danger yet because shards from the exploding aircraft are still as dangerous as shards from the starcraft are still as dangerous as the starcraft was in as a solid form, right? So it's possible for player characters to find maybe abandoned ships floating in the air and the debris moving at hyper velocities through air currents or something like that, and have to watch out for that. Deadman says, in ancient times, the Mediterranean had a number of whirlpools that lasted for years and even spawned legends like Scylla and Charybdis. I don't know how to pronounce that, and I probably butchered it like mispronouncing Achilles and Achilles or something. Rickard says, and as we all know, Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space. Like, damn it, why'd you have to discover gravity? It didn't have to work like this before, right? Shabti? Shabti. Okay, thank you very much. Scylla and Charybdis. Okay, you guys, you know I butcher the pronunciations. You guys know that already. It's not in my normal parlance, despite the fact that I like Greek and Roman mythology, which is weird. But I've only been able to read it. Harry says D&D space is different than actual space. Is i.e. Read Spelljammer. Of course, it's the phlogiston or phlogiston or whatever. As a matter of fact, there were plenty of stories that during the age of exploration in literature where they talked about the fact that space, was basically just more air. It wasn't a void. It wasn't a vacuum. There is a role-playing game, Space 1889, that is a classic that deals with the fact of just basically taking a ship and throwing it in space so you could sail it like a regular sailing vessel. So Omen brings up, yes, ancient Egyptian constructs. Yep. Walk like an Egyptian. Although I'm thinking that might be a little bit offensive at this point. But anyway, yes, there could be ancient civilizations, and the reason those ancient civilizations have brought to us some of their historically shaped and designed craft and things like the animal-headed beings might be that way for a reason, so that Horus and Osiris and the rest of them they may have designed things to look a certain way because they are practical, not necessarily because they are ornamental. Although having something look cool is pretty cool. It does look like there's air in space, like in Star Wars. That's why we can hear things. And Deadman says it's phlogiston. I thought there was a FLA. Whatever. It's whatever. It doesn't exist. So you can't really mispronounce something that doesn't exist unless the writer, I guess, specifically said how it's supposed to be described, which I think is kind of bad. I think the idea of us are I don't there's no reason to worry about the pronunciation. It's to worry about what it is. Joe says the wreckage is more dangerous, more targets, smaller. PDS can lock onto thousands of small targets as well. The Isaac Arthur talks about the idea of, and we've seen this before, where you may have lasers, point defense systems. I was going to get it. Point defense systems could take out small bits of wreckage. Also, depending on how the point defense systems are designed, maybe those are the kind of things that like internally they're like, well, we need point defense systems to keep these things away, but outsiders are like, your point defense systems are weapons and you're threatening us. They're like, no, we're not. Yes, you are. So laser systems, it could be possible that in order to approach a location that has a point defense system or anti-aircraft or something, that the player characters must use some other methods to fly in, or at least to circumnavigate the hazard to allow the flying character to arrive so that they aren't shot down, either with codes or some kind of symbols or smoke signals or sending a coded message or stealing something. So it's a possibility that you can create a puzzle, like a layered encounter where, yes, the flying character is needed to achieve something that only the flying character can do, but that's not possible until, say, the ground level characters are able to acquire a coded chip that the flying character must get, or there's a scroll that with the activation words to open up the portal that happens to be floating in the air and things like that, combining those things together. And of course, in a world where there are flying other creatures, a flying portal in the air may not be unprotected, right? There might be things flying around it. There may even be, we talked about those guards flying on griffins. And that they may be a thing flying around in your world, and what a great excuse to start using them too. You could, when the characters are first to third, fourth level, you they see these things, but they don't get to interact with them. But when they get to like fifth level, you're like, now's the time I can give them like they can go on an adventure to get a mount that they can fly on, and another character finally gets to the level of getting the fly spell and whatnot. And then this opens up a whole new. Instead of being afraid of it, this may open up a whole new encounter of sorts. And by the way, much like having an aquatic adventure and giving your PCs temporary access to breathing underwater, why not give them temporary access to winged cloaks or constructed glider wings by the gnomes, or a magic spell that puts gossamer wings on their backs given to them by the fey creatures. And hell, you could even have different maneuverabilities based on butterfly wings versus moth wings versus dragonfly wings, or going more avian. A hawk's wings might be different than owl's wings or hummingbird wings, or something of that nature, right? F or F based on the transponder. Yeah, yeah. Transponder systems. Joe's bringing it. Like you could even have, you could even have like the PCs, because the transponder systems they shift their codes maybe so often, or there's danger because they've already seen someone flying around, or targets flying around. They may shift their transponder system, say on a daily basis, to hourly or even by the minute. Oh, F is friend or foe. I didn't know that. Now, yeah, it could be either wearing a device or sending out a signal, or it could be much like Morse code, where you take a mirrored surface and flash a series of long and short coded messages. Could also be a thing, as well as, like I said, smoke signals. There could be horns or something. It could be any number of those things. Or hell, the flying person needs to get into the city. The ground people walk up to the city gates, and they're like, "Hey, listen, we've got someone that needs to get in here, and you guys have your point defense systems up. Could you like shut them down temporarily for us?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure. Drop off a couple of credits, and you're fine." We didn't know that. I mean, that may be also the thing as well. Yeah. Deadman says its nickname. Oh, talking about the phlogiston. It's saying it's nicknamed the flow. So there is that. And ancient peoples thought there was phlogiston above the atmosphere. So I thought it was I thought it was spelled with an A. I can't. I don't have Spelljammer. Yeah, they did think that, and much like magnetic waves and the Van Allen belt and things like that, why not make that a real? You can make that a real thing in your world, right? Why not have this flow, the phlogiston, above your world, and that is where if you get there, like it could be so strong that there's an entire world above the world you have, and things just don't hit the ground, or maybe by the time they hit the ground, you can't. They're like unrecognizable, especially if a knight and its mount falls from the sky, and the PCs are like, "What the hell was that?" And they look up and they're like, "Did I just see something underneath? Wow, that's a whole new level. Let's go there." Harry says current Navy has an IFF that talks with other CIWS or PDS are linked in, talking about point defense systems, and I don't know what CIWS stands for, but yes, I'm not a military historian or current individual, but yes, for simplicity's sake, those things could be handed out, right? Transponders and things. Hey, fire on these things, don't fire on those things, right? close-in weapon systems. Thank you very much, Dead Man. The My mind's somewhere else. Yeah, those systems might just be as simple as carrying a chip or having it stolen from someone, or using your own handheld computer to program it, or hell, it might simply be the outer layer of something you're wearing or on your ship or something. Who Simple is easier, but those easier systems might be the security systems of those systems might be turned up the more dangerous things become. Basically double checking all those transponder systems when they find out that their point defense systems are useless against attacks or something like that. Kristen Rand says thrust mods lift drag mods. Thrust mods lift, drag mods lift. Not certain where you're going with that. Harry says identify friend or be or foes interrogates the system. Yeah, not Friday, but wormholes could also be a thing that you can draw upon to world build from. Oh well, we'll get into that. We kind of did that, but we could specify that. Hell yeah, why not? There's lots of energy you can pull from those as well. Oh, I'm getting past my time. Close-in weapon systems. Thank you very much. And telepathy or telepathy for those systems. Yep, could very easily communicate with someone like, are you friend or foe? Because I'm sensing something. I'm sensing a psychic residue. Like, no, we're friends. Let me in. Yeah, Tesla. I get it. Yeah, the first O in phlogiston can be long as in code, or short as in body, as in phlogiston or phlogiston. Deadman says the phalanx close-in weapon system can fire between 2,000 and 5,000 rounds per minute. Yeah, nasty stuff there. So anyway, yeah, we kind of flowed into some way well away from medieval talk, which it's not really medieval; it's more fantasy grounded. But anyway, tomorrow is World Building Wednesday. Come join us with your great ideas when it comes to world building. We're going to build a world in the sky. World Building Wednesday, basically, we take whatever subject we're talking about, and we build a setting based around it. What things would we have? What kind of safety systems would exist in a world where there is flight available? Featherfall, parachutes, whatever. How easy access would it be to travel from one place to another? Are we going to even have floating islands, or will we have different worlds or whatnot? Anyway, guys, thank you very much for supporting the channel. Thank you very much for being here. This is long form content. I know it's maybe not appropriate for YouTube, but guys, thank you very much. Please, just help spread the word. By the way, just to let you guys know that future Fridays will no longer be attached to our weekly theme. It will be specifically transhumanist, the Expanse, Altered Carbon, Eclipse Phase, and that kind of thing. But if you are not interested in those things, please stop by anyway. Yeah, we might talk about some things that might spark some great ideas. Anyway, guys, thank you very much, and everyone, have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye. Thank you very much for watching.